In this first tutorial, we're going to be looking at how you hygienically prepare yourself before cooking. This is a really important topic and one that you should cover before you cook your flapjacks.
So what are we talking about when we talk about working hygienically? Now it's important that you understand there's a difference between working safely in the kitchen and working hygienically in the kitchen.
When we're talking about working safely in the kitchen, we're generally talking about reducing the chance of causing injury to yourself or someone else. On the other hand, when we talk about working hygienically within the kitchen, we tend to be referring to bacteria and germs and ways of reducing their numbers so that they don't harm people in the form of things like food poisoning.
So preparing yourself to work hygienically within the kitchen is a way of reducing the chance of you passing bacteria onto food which could make somebody poorly. One of the first ways we can address the way that we are working hygienically is to think about what we wear before we start cooking. Now you might have already noticed I'm wearing something a little bit unusual today. This is called a chef's white or a chef's jacket, and it's often what you'll see professional chefs wear in the kitchen. Now if you haven't got one of these, a really good alternative is just to wear a standard apron. So you are covering your clothes, which might be a good safety feature because it might prevent your clothes from getting caught in any machinery or anything like that, but it's also a hygienic preventative measure as well. And what I mean by that is if you've got bacteria on your clothing before you start cooking and you don't wear an apron or a chef's white, any of those bacteria could get transferred to the materials or the ingredients that you're using.
Whilst we're on the subject of what we wear, it's also important to consider what you wear on your feet whilst you're cooking. Aside from some obvious safety reasons behind not wearing open-toe shoes, there are some hygiene reasons behind it as well. Feet are notorious for harbouring more bacteria, so it's recommended that you wear closed-toe shoes when you're cooking in the kitchen.
Another preventative measure is to make sure that long hair is tied back away from the face. So anything past sort of shoulder length needs to be tied up and away, and it's no good tying it to the side where the hair can still be at the front of your body. The hair could contaminate the food, which would be a physical contaminant. It's not very nice having hair in your food, but it's also very unhygienic because there's bacteria in hair. So anyone with long hair should make sure it's tied back, and they should do that before they start handling the food. The next thing we need to think about is jewellery. You can see I'm wearing a bracelet and rings here. Now most people think that needs to be removed in case it fell off into the food, which is a very good point, but there's another hygiene reason we need to remove jewellery. When you wear jewellery, skin underneath your jewellery is getting quite hot and humid and moist. Those are really good conditions for bacteria, which means that bacteria and germs love living underneath jewellery and they'll grow in numbers, making them more dangerous. So wearing jewellery when you're cooking is a very good way of transferring bacteria onto food. So everything should be removed before you start cooking and before even washing your hands. So hopefully you'll know that before you start cooking, you need to wash your hands thoroughly. But before you do that, there's some other things that we need to consider to do with your hands. First of all, you need to look at your nails. They need to be trimmed short. And the reason for that is that long nails can harbour more dirt and therefore bacteria underneath them. So short trimmed nails. They also need to be clean. So have a good look at your nails. Do they need a nail brush on them just to make sure they're nice and clean? On the same vein, it's important that chefs don't wear nail varnish when they're cooking. Nail varnish disguises whether or not there's dirt underneath the nails, plus there's a physical contaminant there. Nail varnish can flake off into the food, which again isn't very hygienic.
Washing your hands is a vital step in terms of preparing yourself hygienically before you start cooking. Now it's important that you take this step once you've prepared yourself in every other way, as already discussed. There's no point washing your hands, then tying your hair back, and therefore transferring any potential bacteria from your hair back onto your hands again. You also need to make sure that you wash your hands with hot, soapy water. It needs to be as hot as you can tolerate, but obviously not so hot that you're going to burn yourself. Bacteria don't like that level of heat. If it's just lukewarm, they do like that level of heat, and so it won't necessarily kill off any bacteria on your hands. That's what the soap is there for too. Antibacterial soap is great for killing off any bacteria or anything harmful that might transfer onto your food. It's important that you thoroughly wash your hands, getting in between your fingers, your thumbs and your wrists as well. It's important to know as well that you might have to repeat this step several times during a practical session. And that's because any time that your hands come into contact with a contaminated surface, you need to wash them again. So for example, when you're handling raw meat, You can also contaminate your hands by simply touching your face or scratching your head, so it's important to try to avoid doing this when you're cooking, but if you do, just make sure you wash your hands straight after. It's a good idea to start building in a routine to help you prepare hygienically before you attempt any of your cookery sessions. There are 5 steps you need to remember. Make sure you're wearing closed shoes, put on an apron, tie your hair back, remove your jewellery and wash your hands thoroughly. The more you complete this routine, the more it will just become second nature and you won't even think about doing these things before you start your cookery sessions.